The Butterfly's Dream by Kerberos 314, Chapter 27, the Odyssey. Learning is a process. For example, it took 2 lifetimes of passive interaction for me to learn certain human idioms in the idiosyncrasies, and still I do not pretend to understand all of them. I understand why they use them. Such tiny minds are incapable of thinking much outside their own calciferous containers, and so they equate new experiences with things they already know. Thus, we come to a sea of blackness. Whatever I may be, god or demon, I am part of nature's domination. Humans compared me to a living natural disaster because that's what they can comprehend, but no one can fully grasp nature's undeniability. Never did I fear it, but there was, and still is, a healthy respect for its brutality. I remember standing in front of the sea long ago, saying goodbye to Isobu for the first and last time. It swallowed him like a piece of driftwood, no different than the man-made ships I picked apart in docks. The experience was humbling to say the least, sitting in front of the endless sea, so peaceful, so peaceable, yet with an enmity hidden within the listless of each wave, both parts of the whole. So many human saints revolved around the sea. I now know why. This darkness was massive and daunting, like the sea, concealing an unknown. I had lived long enough to learn about these things. Would the others be able to do the same? There were plenty of fish in the sea, in this expansive unknown. There were always ones bigger than you, lurking just beneath the surface. Eyes wider than his stomach, he had bitten off more than he could chew. Hello, Red. Roman Torchwick just hadn't realized it yet. That impenetrable shroud broke just slightly, when and where I cannot say. The darkness prevailed, but that was mainly because of the blindfold over her eyes, accompanying the rough ropes digging into her ankles and wrists. I had sensation back at least, and could cast my net further into the room to get a better understanding. Sadly, this advanced recognition did not extend its benefits to Ruby, and so she was like some fish who dwell in the deep sea trenches, blind, cold, and alone. "Hi, Roman," she said groggily. "Did you bring me back for a repeat performance? Also like those fish, hardy and with a mouthful of fangs." "Very funny." Evidently his broken nose had healed, and the whistle accompanying his inhales had gone away. His outboard breath was still a cacophony of noise, more than enough for me to get the lay of the room from the sound of bouncing off the walls. Much smaller, but no less dark and unadorned than the warehouse they had first met. This could best be described as a garage, and perhaps an empty office space, as the smell of gypsum dust from broken drywall lingered in the air. The sounds of traffic outside were muted, if it was there at all. "No, sorry. I'm afraid there's been a bit of a program change." The saturating voice circled around as her steady pulse thumped against the contrasting binds. "You've attracted the attention of some discerning critics, Red. You wanted to act as an adult, so you're going to have to give a special audi- aud- auditum to see if you can make the cut." The man had apparently also recovered his cane, Medua's cudgel, that, or constructed a new one of which caressed the bare skin on Ruby's cheek underneath her blindfold. Maybe you should just stick to normal threatening. I mean, do you know how much you sound like a creep just now?" Roman's long eyelashes fluttered to sound like spooked pigeons. "Or maybe you do know. Ew, ew, ew. Please don't tell me you're the kind of guy that's into that sort of thing. How old is Neil anyway?" A cut opened on her cheek that didn't register until it started to flow. I didn't bother healing it, biding my time as Ruby was. The objective had been accomplished in any case, and the petite sword woman was ascertained to be there too. "Listen, you little brat!" Another small spurt of crimson as the leather gloved hands clasped her cheeks roughly and turned her head to his voice. "If you're entertaining things to be a snuff film, I'm more than happy to skip to the end." "But you won't." Lips pursed forcibly, Ruby responded. Torchwood let go. "And how do you figure that?" "You kidnapped me. Maybe I just wanted to savor this moment uninterrupted." Ruby shrugged in her bindings. Gut instinct did not just go away. If Roman was half the criminal he professed to be, he'd make sure the prophecy he'd foretold would never have a chance to gestate. There were many problems with that, of course. Killing her would no doubt bring down the entire wrath of Beacon on his shoulders, not to mention there was the opinion of the one who'd sprung them from jail to consider. Won't your boss be upset? Fear was something I knew how to sense, and no matter how skilled the poker player or cheater as I suspect Roman Torchwick to be, he could not hide that instantaneous ping on my radar. How do you know about her? The retort was calm, carefully replaced that soft mask. It was an actual question. They had brought her there to interrogate her, to see how much Osmond knew about the racket. I could not tell her this, however, and could only hope that some of Naruto and my combined deviousness seeped into her logic. I don't know. You just kind of seem like the kind of person to be a pussy whipped. Gesturing with her shoulder to where she thought Neil to be. Learning is a process, and it would only be much later that we both learned that particular phrase did not, in fact, refer to a cat. The snickers from the mute girl might have been silent, but her shoulders heaving up and down sent vibrations through the concrete floor and up to Ruby's bare feet. Those uncouth people had taken her boots. I'm sure Roman was seething, but he was also capable of swallowing untold amounts of humiliation if it meant survival. That could be counted as one of his better traits. Apparently, your partners never taught you to answer a question when asked. His humility did nothing for his patience, however, and it showed as he wedged the aluminum cane underneath Ruby's jaw. So I'll ask again, how do you know about that? I answer questions all the time, she stated blithely, unperturbed by the threat. Usually I have to raise my hand if I'm called on in class, but I can't exactly do that here. Speaking of, I really ought to be getting back, so can we do this another time? The sound of Roman's deep breathing drowned out just about everything else as he reined in his concentration. Classes, kiddo, are going to be the least of your worries. The cane rested back on the floor with a solid clunk, giving me a little more detail with the high-pitched frequency. I've got all the time in the world to get what I need out of you, so how long you stay as our guest is not up to me. Neither did he mean it was up to her. It was whomever was giving that low-life criminal's orders that decided her fate. Ruby wasn't one to abide by those kinds of things, though. Well, I really need to be getting back. Her team was probably worried sick. How long had you been gone? So you really shouldn't let me. So you really should let me go. Did you know these knots? Did you do these knots? They're really pretty tight. Please tell me you know how to untie them. Yeah, I tied them, he replied with too much self satisfaction. But why would I want to do that? I went through all this effort to bring you out here so we could play along. How could I let you go so soon? Again, Ruby shrugged silently. Because if you don't, I'll do it myself. The animalistic voice coming from this twiggy body was more than just a shock to Roman and Neil. It was a shock to me as well, as I checked to see if I was unwittingly feeding her chakra. I hadn't even tried to heal the cut on her cheek for this very reason, and yet the feeling was there all the same. It was impossible not to recognize a part of myself in that promise. Plus, I kind of have to go to the bathroom. Shifting her legs against the other in her restraints, the mood was lost, if not the memory. How about no way? Eliminating the lingering malice with a shiver, Torchwick snorted at the preposterous suggestion. Do you think I was born yesterday? You're going to use that as a chance to escape? No, I'm serious. I really have to go. Squirming ever more in her binds, I could feel the empathetic unease from Neo hanging somewhere in the sidelines. Not happening. I'm going to wet myself. Go ahead. Not in front of you. I am not letting you out of my sight. Gah, you are just a perv. Well, no, I'm not. Then let me go to the bathroom. I'm not stopping you. But then I'll be all wet and sticky and gross. Not my problem. I'll make it your problem. The resurgence of this malign tone put a hitch in the man's step and breath. Turning away to break himself of the vile and tarry attraction, which was like a black and red fly trap, he looked instead to his partner, who was giving him a look I can only fathom as disapproval. Their silent conversation must have been fascinating, and as and an aspect of the career criminal that I had not appreciated until this point, nor could I now, for in that excruciatingly long pause I had to yet again contend with the absolute torment of a nearing bursting bladder which flooded into all other thoughts. Let it be known that humans are disgusting. Fine. After untold minutes of bertement conducted only in gestures I cannot begin to guess, the symphony from the fellow female finally won out. Just hold your horses and he sniffed the air. By then it was too late. Now it's your problem. Those poor saps. I do not favor to the borderline inept and woeful unprepared criminals aforementioned, but rather to the unsuspecting students of Beacon. One had to be a bit mentally flexible to become a huntress or a huntress, to be a huntsman or a huntress in the first place, fighting monsters and possibly fellow man. After their initiation and all the sordid affairs seen within the academy halls thus far, the majority felt that they were ready for the trials waiting on the outside world. Those poor fools didn't know how wrong they were. This wasn't the first time she had captured the attention of the entire dining hall. Last time, though, there had been whispers like the dry sapphire fanning a flame. Now all was icily silent. Not a titter, not a giggle, nor even a gasp or a grunt. The only sounds were her bare foot on the cold towel and the lurching rasp behind her. The eyes were similarly wide with trepidation and unease, but the question went unasked. Speculation was not even entertained. This time there was more than a fear or suspicion. There was reverence. How many times have I said before that insanity is a kind of superpower? Battered, bleeding, and covered in chalky white dust as she was, dragging the even more degraded bodies of Torchwick and his accomplice, Ruby could have passed through the middle of a bandit camp unmolested. The tides parted under her searing stare, which looked right through them, until she found what she wanted. Still with the burden trailing behind her, she hobbled over to the communal table where her team and Juniper sat in mute bewilderment, unable to convey whatever horrified shock or relief they might have felt. Letting go of the dead weight, which many doubtless thought was literal, Ruby plodded wearily over to the empty space which had miraculously opened on the bench between her friends and comrades. Nor even her faithful sister, who were all overcome by physical sensations, the reek of ammonia netting of shed dust in their eyes, or the sight of crimson footprints on the tile floor. Not a word until she spoke. "Tadaima!" She gave them a playful smile, and promptly passed out face first into a strawberry sundae which had long since melted. Puckered lips tasted strawberry and something else musky yet minty like the mulch on the forest floor. It was soothing, revitalizing, inflating the lungs and the ego and breaching the mind past that frozen surface. Then he coughed, and all he could taste was brackish bile. "Take it easy, just breathe." He heeded the advice, noting the professional yet feminine note, and trying to orient himself around it. Fitting a face to it was difficult as he tried to banish all the remnant of personalities which kept popping up, eventually coming up empty. Try to sit up. There was no try, as the strong arm lifted him perpetually so that the leftover salt water did not settle in his lungs. I hope this isn't going to be your typical reaction when making it to first base, brat. As my student, you have a reputation to uphold. Jura-sama, please." It wasn't so much the words of his master which sucked him from his stupor, rather the dangerous lilt underneath the differential address. He knew the brogue of an angry woman, as he'd all but been one, and didn't want to be anywhere near it. Almost immediately he was on his feet, then on his rear again, as his legs gave out from underneath him. "Now you've done it. Go away. You may be a sonny now. I won't let you antagonize my patients. Sorry, sorry." Naruto could hear the simpering tone his master always adopted when being browbeaten by a fair species. "I'll be good. Just let me stay with my pupil while he gets his wits about him." The man would not have to wait all that long, as the remaining liquid boiled off in a spark of panic which was only settled by the memory lingering like the smell of hickory. In that short time the proclaimed healer remained silent, acquiescing to the disturbingly sober request. Jiraiya, Naruto wheezed out, having no other choice than to lay eyes on the gargantuan man first before turning towards the source of the gentle ministrations on his back. Sakura-san, pleased that her patient regained his coherence, or perhaps at being remembered, the pink-haired girl gave him a professional smile. Ohisa Shiburu, Naruto-san, he nodded politely. What are you doing here? Naruto and Ruby both had learned to function despite grogginess, letting their bodies work independently of their minds, which were often resistant to the change of scenery, trailing behind in the other world with cosmic jet lag. So while his mind was still in the beacon dining hall, his body was searching for his weapons, enemies, and answers. She answered by rolling her eyes. Shishuo was none too pleased when she found out that you two had skipped town without her permission. It didn't take too long to figure out where you had gone after Kotetsu and Uzomu noted your departure. For him, though, it took longer than usual to catch up to the discussion, those necessary leaps of logic still obscured by the fog, or was that smoke? In that time, his master came to the rescue with arms folded, defending a serious expression. That would be my fault. I guess I forgot to get a permission slip before I left. The girl's pretty face, which could have easily passed for the middle child of the Xiaolong family, scrunched up in a disapproving manner to the flippant excuse. Naruto meanwhile noted his master's sober gaze directed at him, demanding his compliance. This isn't exactly a laughing matter, Jiraiya-sama. Sakura shook her head, but declined further admonishment, knowing the man's character after studying under his former teammate for the past few years. Does it look like I'm laughing? No, it did not. Not even that half-crazed smile which promised victory scraps out from the dregs of defeat was present. Thusly, without even asking, Naruto should have known the score. So what happened? I assume Itachi went after you when he thought he'd knocked me out of the game. Sequently, Jiraiya started to fill in the blanks. I'd hoped you would have thought better of me than to be taken out so easily. Actually, I'd really hoped that you would know better than to get trapped in his genjutsu, but I guess that we still need more practice. Dispelling the disapproval with a shrug. Either that, or luck truly wasn't on our side today. A little of column A, a little of column B in this case. For as much as I boast of my prowess, it grates me to admit that I am susceptible to the Sharingan, and so Naruto needed to be able to protect us both. Yet our luck failed to keep us out of the frying pan, saved us from the fire. For who could have guessed that Ruby would come to our rescue, even when she was entrapped herself? How did you escape the Tsukiyomi? It was a question that Jiraiya wanted answers to. Alas, an explanation was not forthcoming. He regarded our silence with the same concerned suspicion that had plagued the entirety of the training ship for those 2.5 years. Like then, he declined to say anything. Anyways, after bailing you out and making sure that Rockhead didn't drown, I was prepared to make a dash for the border when I was intercepted halfway. He passed the torch on to Sakura with a half-hearted gesture. Like I said, Tsunade-sama was quite upset when she found out you two, Jiraiya-sama, had taken you two outside the village without her permission. So, knowing what kind of trouble you normally get into on your own, she gave him a playful smile that was only slightly strained. She sent us to bring you back, hopefully in one piece. Us? Questioning as he patted himself down, noting that the only detachable part of him was laying next to the traveling cloak he was sat upon. Serrated blade, no worse for wear, though due for an oiling. Hokage-sama might be upset with her old teammate. A measured draught of luxury forced his head to the side, watching the familiar face emerge from the sparse foliage, but I'd be more concerned about how annoyed your teammate is with you right now. The smile which was automatically raised on his face upon seeing Neji come to bail him out yet again was equally banished when he processed the implications of his words. Tempton's pretty mad, huh? The whip's thin eyebrow cocked up for a lashing, letting him know Tenten wasn't the only one hurt by his gallivanting. She's none too happy about being left behind with my cousin. No, that inflammation stung, but not nearly as much as when he realized that his teammate had omitted had any sort of honorifications to his name. In their absence, a deep-seated dread took up residence. What happened? We got here in time to force the Akatsuki into retreat. With a pause too short to ask where the other teen was, Neji gestured further on into the wooden expanse. Sasuke still out with the others. Lee-san, Hinata-sama, Kiba-san, and Shino-san, who are doing their damnedest to assure he doesn't get himself killed, chasing after his brother, who disappeared shortly after we arrived. From his tone, he was not concerned about this ability, and, thanks to Jiraiya-sama, we now at least have a free pass out of Rock Country. Wait, Neji-san means... wait. What Neji-san means is that the Jonin you faced, Kurotsuchi, was handed over to a recovery team in exchange for safe passage. Sakura elaborated. It was a good thing I doped her up after healing her, though. It seems that she was still not too keen on letting you go, even after all that. But considering no serious damage had been done, and they got their commanding officer back, the Iwa Shinobi weren't looking to go up against a contingent that made Akatsuki retreat. So then, everything turned out all right? As he asked the question, his mouth was dry, moisture and hope both sucked out by that fire, which was waxing, robbing him of oxygen. Roshin in hand, the Jinchuriki for the Yonbi and Golbai are alive. That was just their bluff to divert Iwa's attention elsewhere than our fight. The eldest spoke up when it was clear no one else wished to, his duty to deliver the grim news. But it seems that this whole thing was a diversion in itself. Our intervention caused more of a stir than I anticipated with the other shinobi nations. Eyes and ears from every intelligence service knew what was going on only moments after we left because I let them. I thought it would prove critical information to our unwitting allies on the movements on the Akatsuki. Jiraiya sighed, forcing himself to sit down against the rubbery tree trunk, rubbing the creases on his face, which were looking more pronounced than ever before. Lines of age were visibly past the umber tear streak tattoos under his eyes, and he looked old. I should have realized that Akatsuki would take advantage of other nations lowering their guard. I guess I'm getting more careless in my old age. Again that smile, this time bitter at the irony which was life. I suspect that Itachi and Kisame knew they were distractions and dragged the battle out because of that, letting their other members operate in an anonymity. What are you saying, Erosenin? The smile withered and Jiraiya seemed to age another 10 years with a sigh. Another one of Katsuki's teams broke into Kumo, and they got Yujito. Hands made of the universe's aether slapped him upside the head, a pulse which throbbed in his skull and burst his eardrums. He was disoriented, lost sense of direction along with sound. The images swirled in front of his face as his eyes screwed up into his head, and then he was unconscious. I found you! Past the tears of pain and relief, there was a smile, along with that unbreakable levity which was like a solid rainbow in a world of black and white. I wasn't going anywhere. He chuckled, wiggling his wrist within their binds, shoulder blade digging into the wooden cross. Suddenly they were gone. He was on the war-torn ground amidst the field of broken and rusty weapons, slowly being whittled away by oxidation and overcome by the unstoppable march of life as it sought to reclaim its territory. He looked up to see the equally fecund smile facing down at him, fingers like the breeze tuzzling his golden locks. Is this a dream? Isn't it? Surrounded by the paralyzed world of the Tsukiyomi, the blood sky still hanging over them, but with a few cracks in that moon which was pinned high above their heads. But you're here, aren't you? You're real? As real as you are, she giggled. As real as any of us. The illusion they found themselves in was both fixed and malleable. 24 hours, which lasted a lifetime of pain, but an instant of satisfaction. How was this different than reality? How was it any worse? How did you get here? Does it matter? They did not have the time to waste on such questions, merely enjoying the moment they shared as the world crumbled at the horizon, the grass growing to envelop them. It still begged to be answered. If only a cause could be found, the setting could be recreated somehow, some way, they might get a second chance. But what if this was as good as it got? That brief moment of tranquility as everything fell apart around them, the pinnacle of a lifetime, of 1,000 lifetimes. How many lifetimes had it taken to bring them together? How many failed interactions had seen them develop separately, but prematurely. How many more turns of the wheel would it take to see them there again, in that infinite possibility of chances? Both could agree that it was better to have found than lost than to never have lost at all.